What's up, guys? I'm SaltEMike, and this is your Star Citizen Week in Review for April 22nd, 2024. Rest in peace, cargo changes for now, but we got a ton of info around why they're leaving and the future of cargo gameplay, and we got an answer around QED ships and their inclusion in 323, all that and more on today's Week in Review. And as always, if this is your first week in review, this is where I take all of the official Star Citizen news each week, put it into one video, and share my opinions about it. Also live stream on Twitch, twitch.tv/SaltEMike, so stop by if you haven't yet, and say hi. But with that, we have a ton to get through, so let me share with you today's sponsor. Thank you to Raid Shadow Legends for sponsoring today's video. Raid has been my go-to mobile game for a while now. I love that I can play and level up my characters on the go. Raid Shadow Legends are celebrating the arrival of spring in Talaria with a special Spring Hunt minigame. Go to springhunt.plarium.com to participate. They are giving away a bunch of free game consoles and Amazon gift cards worth $10,000. So it's a really exciting event. In addition, new users get 2 packages rewarding 2 super strong epic heroes using the tracking link only. And if that's not enough, Raid is also celebrating community weeks dedicated to the existing Raid players. All users will be getting a legendary champion, Chronicler Aidlin. You can get her by just logging in for 7 days between April 11th and July 8th, and she's amazing at placing valuable debuffs while bypassing the block debuff. Lastly, we have a promo code for all users, SpringHunt24, for the following items. You get 10 XP brew, 100 energy, and 100,000 silver. New players, if you click my link in the description or scan the QR code right here, you can get amazing in-game loot with epic boss killer Tyrell and Rector Drath upon reaching level 25. So just hit my link in the description. So once you're in and crushing your enemies, come find me under the name SaltEMike, join my clan, and we'll be legends together. As always, thank you for supporting me by engaging with our sponsors here, and we have a huge show. So without further ado, let's hurry up and get into the patch notes. So starting out with Monday, we're still in Wave 1 at that point, and the biggest change here was kind of a keybind one. So for now, you have to long press B to switch master modes, and when you're kind of done spooling your quantum drive, you left click to engage it, and you can middle mouse to switch between certain master modes or operator modes within certain master modes. All sorts of stuff is changing, and there was a ton of rebalance with mass drivers like sledges to the point where people were thinking they might be meta, and maybe they will be in the right person's hands. Singes are now using a charge mechanic, and laser scatterguns are looking pretty good. In general, Vulkan has been implemented. I was getting slightly less frames when using it, but it's in just for now to kind of find major issues. It seems not for performance gains. We'll talk a little bit more on that in a minute. Lastly, they made some changes with the storms. I was no longer getting force reacted, and they were kind of less brutal visually. Then Tuesday, we were still in Wave 1, and they made some updates to the minimaps, but the big thing is with piracy. The quantum dampener works. We weren't sure if we were going to get this. We heard it on an SCL a while ago that they didn't know what they were going to do. Well, now they do. 20-kilometer range after interdiction, and you're stuck at SCM speeds. My big gripe for now is the player who is dampened isn't really notified well enough that they are, so you can't really figure it out. I tested this with Hannah, 888 in Arena Commander, and the Mantis was quite easy to kill even for me, but in Antares is a pain. So it was super hard to kill, and yeah, so lots of balance stuff that's going to be happening here, but they did make a decision on what they're going to do with QEDs. So that's cool. Quantum drives, spool based on the base values that are here on the screen, and then are modified based off of the quantum drive that you use. And I think it kind of speeds up a little maybe than what we used to have. And lastly, for this, I did see some improved client performance, but the servers were still a mess. On Wednesday, we went to Wave 2. They completed all the mini-maps for all the landing zones, which is nice to see, and they fixed AI standing on chairs. Do you believe them? Maybe in this case. I've only seen one standing on the chair, and it was later in the week. So far, they're acting pretty normally. So now, if you are decoupled, this is a big one, you no longer fall to the surface, so you stay floating, kind of, and only the inputs that you provide influence the direction that the ship moves in. This is a really big change if you guys haven't used decoupled mode, now's the time to give it a try. I think it might feel a lot better than it has in the past. They also speed up the time it takes to regen laser weapons, and it's certainly noticeable to me. Let me know if it's noticeable to you, and I think we might have higher capacity mags as well. And leading up to the patch where buying and renting ships in-game is incredibly important, it's still not working. And lastly, they are making performance improvements as well, and I'm starting to see them as we're going through the week. Thursday, another Wave 2 patch, and there are a ton of changes here, but not too many big things to make note of. Loving the more random NPC loadouts, though. The juice for this patch was in the Arena Commander section, and it was all around engineering. We had a ton of fun filling a squad game. Feels like it's really close to kind of feeling good. Not quite there yet. It's still not in a great place. The ship's health was not good enough yet, but we were starting to see damage to fuses and components. The A2 was dying just a bit too fast, and I really think they have a chance to make this a lot of fun. So far, not seeing a lot of the hate around it that everybody is typing on Spectrum. It doesn't feel too tedious to me. It feels great on the defending side, trying to take out the combat ships. Now, as we get to Friday, before we get into that, we're trying to rebalance the A2's health. For this engineering mode, it was not resolved on Friday. So something else is going to have to happen in the future for this to truly feel how it should. Now, for the Friday Wave 2 patch, let's get into the meat of it. They made a seemingly minor change to the quantum markers, but they're looking pretty nice. And what I thought was going to be a huge change was kind of around sub-targeting, and that we were going to be able to sub-target power plants and other things, but it only works on non-capital gold standard ships. So it's not that big of a change at all because it's maybe 5 ships total. I'm not sure how many fit in this category, but you see it with the Gladius here. And yeah, it's cool, but it doesn't work on the Connie. It doesn't work on anything that isn't gold standard. They also improved using the star map. It's much smoother of an experience now. And yeah, it already was pretty smooth, so good on them for what they've been doing there. And lastly, the mini-maps are starting to look really nice now as well. Still very blue hollow like crazy, but it's much more readable. And then Vulkan is not coming in 3.23 technically. And that's the last thing that I want to discuss around the patches is the lack of inclusion of it in 3.23. They are looking to make it as good or as bad, depending how you want to look at it, as DX11 for now. And they do not have multi-threading turned on and won't until they improve the baseline experience of what we're dealing with Vulkan. And then we should, I think we'll see a lot of huge improvements when they turn that on. So yeah, I don't know. I think we will. Maybe we won't. We've been hearing about this for years, and we're right on the cusp of it. And I think a lot of people were really excited about this, and it's a super bummer that we're not seeing them. So with that said, let's move into roadmap updates where we'll talk a little bit more about those 3.23 delays. All right, so almost everything around cargo coming into 3.23 has been delayed. So honestly, for me, these were the features I was looking most forward to. So 3.23.0 instantly becomes a much less exciting patch and probably one that I might skip entirely. So we're losing item banks, personal and instance hangars, cargo missions, and freight elevators. Now I'll say this, I don't want to see any of these updates kind of coming in the game being bad. So a little time to cook is never really a bad thing. It is such a big change. And yeah, it needs to be at least decent, right? I hope 3.23.1 is when we'll see them, but who knows? And then things being added to the cards for 3.23 are 2 things that are surprising since we've been talking about them in the patch notes for weeks now. And it is Vulkan and the water sim stuff, but these aren't even committed yet. So all this is all very weird, and we just talked about how Vulkan is not really coming into the patch. They're just making sure it's stable so they can actually implement the performance improvements that we're supposed to get from it. So I don't consider it really in until we're gaining the benefits of it. Let me know what you guys think about that. I might be overly negative on this. I think it's just kind of how it is and telling it how it is. I don't feel bad or angry about it. It's just how it feels to me. And then committed for 3.23 is a ton of stuff here, and we're definitely hitting the deadline before Invictus. And as of right now, these are the things that we are pretty much guaranteed to get. It's the Moby-Glass rework, FPS loot screens, FPS maps, which you just heard we're getting all the locations, visor and lens rework, player interaction experience, EVA, the star map rework, master modes, and the stuff around creatures, and the engineering experimental mode, Grav Royale, custom lobbies, and the Miner's Lament map in AC. So a lot of visual things, a lot of UI things, a lot of quality of life improvements, and obviously we know not a lot of gameplay. So that was the roadmap roundup that kind of everybody was dreading, and it happened. And yeah, so I think it's the right decision. It is what it is, but here we are. So let's move on to video updates, where we hear a little bit more as to why we got these delays. All right, let's start out with an ISC real quick. This episode was all about water tech, and I'm not going to lie, it's all visual. So I won't be cutting out anything from the episode, but it will be linked in the description so you can check it out if you want to find out more. In the end, it's super cool, super immersive. The dude who does the water is super awesome, but for now, it's not really impacting the video game in any way other than that immersion factor, right? The meet was in SCL this week. Question and answer session about hangars and cargo. And yeah, they take no time to get to the important questions, and the guest Chad McKinney explains what happened to cargo in 323.
But yeah, like, so what happened with cargo? Well, the first thing I was like, hey, is like, I don't know that there's anyone that's like more personally invested in seeing this like through than I am. So it was disappointing to come to the conclusion that we did need to pull it from 323 or push it into, you know, a point patch, but it was the right call. And there's a lot of factors that went into that. Just to kind of get into it, like the first thing is that it's a really, really big, it's not even, I don't even think you can call it a single feature set. It's like a whole change to the way that the game works from top to bottom in many different aspects. So whenever we started development on this last year, you know, we come up with a certain schedule, and at the end of the day, if you look at where we're hitting, you know, while it is disappointing to see it slip, we're really close actually. It's like, it's kind of like throwing a dart at like a target like a mile away. You know, we are a bit off. We missed the target, but we're not so far off. It's not going to be like, you know, 6 months from now or anything like this. So it's a bit disappointing that it missed the release, but we are really close. But so like the first thing is just like, it's big and it's hard to estimate and quite pin down all the unknowns and everything, and make sure that like your dates are exact by the time the actual date comes up. So we're a little bit off on that part, but there's also just been a lot of things that have happened during that time. Some of the stuff towards the end that have really informed that decision making are the fact that there's still some feature work that needs to be finished out. There's some iteration that we're still doing on certain aspects, or that we did on certain aspects of the design once we got things up and going. In particular, the freight elevator kiosk UI and the item bank UI. Once we played with them a bit, we realized we needed to update them and change them to make them a better experience. And then on top of that, in particular, the hangar instancing, ASOP, and transit kind of flow graph there about going from all these different stages of gameplay had some stability problems. And it's the kind of thing that I really felt strongly that we can't go live with that being not really stable, because if we do and it ends up being a problem, the game essentially becomes unplayable for the players. So it's not like, you know, if we went out with salvage and maybe there's some issue with salvage, or if we're going out with mining, or, you know, the rocks sometimes crash your client like that is really unfortunate. Obviously,
that affects a small subset of people.
Yes, this is the kind of thing where the game could literally just be unplayable.
You can no longer summon your spaceships. You can no longer load your spaceships. It's a pretty heavy thing.
All right, so I let that play for a long time, and because, yeah, it's the most important gameplay feature in the patch, and there's going to be other clips that are going to be playing for a long time here as well. And like Chad said, it isn't just one, it's a number of things. Sounds like they're really, really close, and we've waited for years for this to improve, and I can wait a few weeks or months. I also think it's absolutely the right choice given how unplayable the game is currently. What cannot be ignored, though, is that it's a self-inflicted wound. The only reason it is not making it into 323.0 is because there's a ship sale coming, but at the same time, this wound to me is like a paper cut, right? A normal studio would completely delay the patch for the same amount of time it will take to get the cargo patch in. So I'm just approaching 323.0 as if maybe it doesn't really exist. My 323 is when cargo comes in. It's all the same at that point, right? That just doesn't matter. If you're interested in the 323.0 stuff, you go play that. I'm not as interested in it. No need to argue about it. Not being super salty, as you guys say, because of the name or whatever. It just kind of, I'm not as excited anymore. Okay, one last thing on the delay that I feel needs to be shared, though.
So, like, as people are probably aware, there's been some team restructuring, personnel changes, changes to our like kind of vision and direction that have, in particular, I think impacted like the teams working on this feature set. So it's made it a challenge at times to, stay focused on it and not be affected by all that, people changing, bringing people on board and getting them up to speed about, the whole project and everything. So it's been a whole journey, but we're really close. It is disappointing to put in this much effort that we've put into it and then miss it, but I felt like it was the right call.
So he's from the LA studio, and in the intro, he said he currently is working in LA. So yeah, it is clearly more than just the fact that they missed the date. I really hope for this kind of restructuring thing improves the development. So far, it's kind of hard to see with how kind of poorly the 323 patch is performing and the biggest feature not making it. Next up is one of the biggest questions we have with the new instance hangars. How do we prevent unwanted guests from going inside?
The first thing I'll say is with everything, this is like the first release of this. So what we come out with now isn't necessarily like our final vision or where we leave it. And I can tell you that we already are going to continue working on this after this release. So there's going to be more to be done all around. But for this release, the way that it's going to work is if somebody who is not in your party somehow ends up in your hangar, then what we'll do is we'll treat it kind of similar to the impounding behavior that we have at the landing areas, where they'll get a bit of a warning, but then soon thereafter, they're going to just get kicked out and teleported out into the station. If they're in a ship, the ship will get impounded, and that'll be that. It's in an armistice zone, so the players won't be able to like draw weapons or shoot or anything like this. But excuse me, but we do want to make sure that like players aren't just, murdering each other in there. But we can do better. Like I said, we want to have improved security in the future and make it a more less gamey kind of experience to have heightened security in there. But it is just going to be using the impounding and teleporting behavior for this release.
Does that include, so obviously there's some time limit, there's some time period, a couple seconds, whatever. If I grab some, if I get in there really fast and I pick something up before I'm impounded, do I teleport out with my stolen booty?
You will, but I mean, it'll be considered stolen at that point.
Okay.
Yeah, like there's more to be done there, I think, to make that like a more well-founded experience. But like for now, yeah, you'll get it, but it will have been stolen. I think it'll probably prove challenging to do a lot there, like in practice. But I'm not going to be surprised when we go live. I'm sure there's going to be some people who are going to try to grief things, and we might have to react in particular. But it's just one of those things where we need to spend more time with it to make a more well-founded, like full solution there. So we're going with the kind of easy or quick but clean solution of just like, just teleport people out and just, don't try to be too clever about it.
Now, I want to ask this to you guys. How confident do you feel right now after this answer? I'm somewhere in the middle. I think there's a lot less griefing going on than people say is happening. I live stream my location on no delay, and I rarely run into many issues. Eventually, I think things like this will become a major problem though. So I hope when the game matters, they have that elegant solution that they're talking about figured out. Then the chat asked for basically another big question I wanted to hear the answer to.
In the chat, they asked, okay, so that's how intruders. What about group members, party members? What's their access to your hangar like?
Yeah, so if they're in a party with you, if someone's in a party with you, they have access to your hangar, even if you're not there. So let's say like my home location is Area 18, and Jared, you're in a party with me. You can go to Area 18 and you'll have access to my hangar. You can go in when I'm not there. You can go in while I'm there. You can use the freight elevator kiosk while you're in there. You can use the item bank. We want to make multi-crew gameplay as seamless as possible. So this is something in particular that we were definitely really thinking about throughout the whole process. Effectively, the way that it'll work is when you go to the access elevator in the station and you call the elevator, you're not going to get a list of every hangar at the station. Like I can't just go to somebody else's hangar randomly. Rather, what has to happen is I need to be in a party with them. And then when I go in the hangar, I'll see my hangars in the elevator list and any party members' hangars in my list as well. This is also another way that we tamper down on some of the griefing. It doesn't get rid of it immediately. Like I'm totally aware that someone can just walk into the elevator. But the point is that you can't just, without someone there, use the elevator and go to somebody else's hangar like independently.
I don't know about you guys, but I think this opens up org gameplay tremendously. Even in the current patches, it makes it a lot easier joining people to your hangar, sharing ships with them, all that stuff. You can have an org that just has all the ships and you share them with your friends, and that's where you're doing the buying and selling from, especially when cargo gameplay comes out. It might be really interesting. Then we get to the question of what happens with people kind of with small accounts and they want to buy ships in game. How do they get a bigger hangar?
So what happens if you buy a larger ship after that? What happens to your hangar if you end up buying a ship that's too big for the hangar that you've been assigned?
Yeah, great question. It's one of those things that like I should have gone into more detail on in the ISC. It's funny, even when my wife watched it, that was the very first question that she asked me after it was done. So like, I know everybody was like, that's, you know, immediately, well, what if I get another ship or whatever? So yes, we've thought about that. For this release, again, this is just the first release. We're gonna improve on this aspect of it. For this release, the way that it will work is if you buy a new ship, whether that be outside the game or in-game with in-game currency, and then you go to request that ship, you can't do it if the hangar isn't large enough. So instead, what would happen is you would be given what we call a public hangar. And a public hangar is similar to a personal hangar, just the difference is that if you were to leave the location, anything that you left in that hangar will be cleaned up and thrown away. So you can't treat it like your personal hangar. Like the personal hangar, you can decorate and leave all this stuff everywhere. You log out of the game, log into the game, it's all still there, etc. The public hangars aren't like that, although they're not really that different. And what I mean by that is, one of the things I didn't have time to really go into in the ISC is, you know, how does all this work when you're not at your home location and you're not using a personal hangar? Let's say my home location again is Area 18 and I go to Beijing Point and I land. Those are still persistent hangars. They're just not your personal hangars. And the distinction here is just that if I were to take my ship and land at Beijing Point and then I'm given a public hangar while I'm at Beijing Point, while I'm there, anything that I leave in there is going to stay in the hangar. So let's say I just drop a bunch of boxes on the ground and then go into the station to sell some commodities or whatever, or do anything else, me and my friend. Then I go back to the hangar. The stuff in that hangar is still there. If I'm going to log out of the game and log back into the game, I actually still have my stuff there. It's only when I purposefully leave the location that stuff is taken away. So that's a public hangar.
I think he was pretty clear here, and we're going to be covering a ton of stuff in this show, so I don't want to go over it too much. It's a huge feature set, right? So on to the next bit of info. Chad explains how they want to get kind of addressing the issue around upgrading your hangar in the future.
What we want to do in a subsequent release is to add a a whole pipeline and feature set for upgrading your hangars, including like moving things around, and on top of that, renting the hangars at other locations in the game. Like, it's not the intention that the hangars are only at the initial home locations. It's just where we're starting now because we don't have the time to implement all of the feature work and backend that's needed for rentals and upgrades.
Now, I have no idea when they plan on delivering this, but man, I can't wait. It sounds like the perfect gold sink hangar fees, right? On top of that, this is 100% a progression path for players, as Chad stated in kind of soon after this clip. Okay, on to this next one. I considered skipping, but honestly, it's kind of awesome. I'm not gonna lie.
One of the things that we are adding in this release is furniture. So you are going to be able to buy furniture in game at certain locations and then be able to decorate your hangar with that, couches and stuff like this. So you'll still have some things that are more social, that are more, you know, interesting, make it feel a little bit more homey to decorate your hangar with. And otherwise, I look forward to all the fun shenanigans that people get up to with where they end up putting these things. But it's not like, we definitely want to encourage that kind of thing. We want players to feel like this is their home. We want players to have some fun things to be able to decorate and place throughout the world.
So yeah, you might think it's cringe, but I love this. And what's kind of even worse, you might think, is this is a wonderful opportunity to actually monetize. I want them to get away from gameplay impactful sales like ships and weapons and components and armors and all that stuff, and move to more cosmetic-like things like this. They could easily sell a cool furniture set, a modern one or an industrial one, and I would be fine with that. I love this idea for hangars and bases one day. Super, super cool. This next one is not exactly a super important question that was asked, and it was kind of, how do smaller outposts work with automated loading, right? So that's whatever. But then we got a more detailed answer onto how the system works as a whole, the entire cargo system.
Great question. The answer is it won't. So if there's not a hangar, you won't have auto loading as an option. That is a feature, not a bug. Like the point is that like a small outpost is not the kind of place where you're going to be doing large trades. We're going to be, this is something I'm not sure I got quite into as much detail on the ISC, but one of the big changes that we're making about how you buy cargo is changing it from being a raw resource allocation. So you won't just be picking like 3 SEU and then have the system like automatically figure out the configuration of cargo that you would need to put that into your ship. Rather, the places in the game are going to have certain stock, and that stock will include the box size. So the outposts, the smaller locations in the game, are going to only trade in smaller volumes and smaller box sizes. So like 1 SEU, 2 SEU. And the idea is that like those places, you're going to just manually load it yourself, and you wouldn't show up with a C2 and fill it with like 700 SEU of 1 SEU boxes and then have it automatically pack it for you. That's not the point of that location in the game. It's not the route that we want that to satisfy. It's not what we want to do. Is differentiate the game. We want the locations in the game to serve different roles. We want there to be a reason to go to different places in the game, and we want there to be a reason to use different ships in the game. If you're a player that owns multiple ships, you will be now rewarded for, you know, good decision making as far as like your trade route considerations and your location considerations and your ship choices. And on top of that, if you party with people, you're going to benefit from the, let's say, the choices that you have as a group. And if you're on a larger ship, you're going to benefit from them being able to help you.
So this idea there are smaller boxes at smaller locations is really cool, actually. I was super concerned at first, and I listened to this clip maybe 30 times, and I think I'm more comfortable with the fact that this could work to bring smaller cargo ships into the fold legitimately, but we're going to have to play it to see. And to add to this, he talks about the large routes and how they might work.
A bigger trade route location like the LEOs, which are a hub for feeding the landing areas, those are meant to be big routes. So like they are going to support automatic loading. We want there to be big ships that go there and get these big amount of loads and haul them around. But for those, we would like them to deal in the kinds of box sizes that make sense for high volumes. So like the 24, the 32 SEU boxes. Think of it like this: like you wouldn't show up to. I'm from Oklahoma, so I'm gonna drop a reference. I don't know if anybody knows what a Love's is, but it's like a small truck stop, right? So you wouldn't show up to that with like a huge truck. I mean, you would with a truck, but you wouldn't then like take, 10,000 boxes of Twinkies and then load up your truck and then go to another, Love's somewhere in the world. That's not how trade routes work, right? Yeah. Instead, you have smaller shipments that will, feed smaller routes. But then for bigger trade routes, we have like these huge ships that carry huge loads of freight across the Panama Canal, all this stuff, and they have really particular routes that they go to with these much larger shipping containers. So that's the idea here, is that like there are going to be places that just deal in higher volume, there are going to be places that deal in smaller volume, and there are going to be some places in between. The locations will have the facilities there that make sense for them.
The only thing I would add to this is the large routes I hope they somehow make it make sense. With the Panama Canal example that he gave, that basically those large cargo ships take tons of different boxes, tons of different commodities, and right now the routes that we play are mostly one meta thing that is the most profitable, right? So it'd be cool to see that variation. Now, this one threw me for a loop. Someone asked about the capacity of freight elevators.
So there's 4 different sizes. There's small, medium, large, and extra large. I don't want to speak off the top of my head to the exact volumes of those because I'll probably misremember one. But they are different. And we want to basically encourage people to upgrade. The idea is that if you have a smaller ship, you shouldn't necessarily be able to do huge hauling runs. On the flip side, we want to encourage players being able to call up ground vehicles or smaller vehicles in the freight elevators, which we have not forgotten about. I know that's something that players were looking forward to. That's still something we want to support. So the sizes of the freight elevators are designed to hold the ships that we want players to be able to call up from. So the small ones aren't going to be like super tiny, but the larger ones were certainly going to be better for hauling like 32 SEU boxes, for example.
So the reason it threw me up for a loop was, up to this point, we always saw 960 SEU displayed everywhere in every bit of content they shared. So I was assuming freight elevators would all be the same size, but I guess not. So there were some quick hits here that I'll add as well. You will access your own freight elevator and item bank inventory in other players' personal hangars, not the owners, maybe until Org gameplay is in. Anywhere there is a hangar, the plan is to have personal hangars. So not in 323, but Grimhex can be a place that you can have a personal hangar in the future, essentially. There is no limit to how many players are allowed in your hangar. Whatever you can fit, it will sit. You cannot use FPS weapons in your hangar. Tractor beams are good, of course, and they want us to manually load. So they are going to make auto loading expensive, it seems like, but it will take into consideration the number of boxes you are moving. So go as big as possible if you want to make the most amount of money. And then they want us to use empty cargo containers, so allowing us to name them, color them, and all these things are on the list, but nothing in terms of when. Whew, that was a lot, but cargo is a really big thing. So let me know down in the comments if you enjoyed that, because yeah, that's a lot of listening and a lot of talking about one video. But with that said, let's move on to the other updates, and I promise it's a short section. We're almost done with the video, guys. All right, and as always, we start out with a sneak peek, and yeah, they really got nothing here. It's just more dogs and birds. So if you haven't seen these yet, you aren't really paying attention to Star Citizen, are you? And you're most likely not watching my videos. So leave a comment down below and let me know if this is the first time you've seen the new creatures in Star Citizen. And then moving on, the Galactapedia. This was also a bit boring because it's so Squadron 42 focused. All the stuff they're kind of working on is little Squadron 42 lore, it seems like. The main article is the fall of the Virgil system, and the rest are smaller articles about similar lost systems, basically where we lost systems to the Vandal from the UEE. And then also, there was a Squadron 42 monthly report. We had one. but it was kind of, again, exclusive to Squadron 42 stuff. Usually I'm able to pull out a lot of PU stuff from that, but maybe this is the end of that, right? Feature complete, no more features being made, so the Squadron 42 monthly reports may not be that interesting anymore. I've asked you this quite a bit. Leave a comment down below. Let me know if you want to cover them in more detail, but I really didn't see anything that I found interesting. And with that, that'll do it. So thank you so much for watching the video. Again, it was a super long one. Please don't forget to kind of engage with our sponsor, Raid Shadow Legends, down below, and check out the game if you guys haven't yet. And links, as always, are down in the description. Leave a comment down below if you guys enjoyed the video. Let me know if I missed anything. There were tons and tons of things, but the video was super, super long. And yeah, leave a like if you enjoyed it, and subscribe if you're new here and are looking for more Weeks in Review. And with that, I'll catch you guys next week. Also, it's 3 o'clock in the morning, so if you make any comments about the way I look, that's why.